how to deliver an excellent speech. And what are the 3 elements that make an excellent speech? The first element, I believe, is to understand your audience. So for this example, audience is Toastmasters and guests interested in public speaking. So talking about 3 elements of a successful speech seemed like it would make sense. When you don't have the right thing to say, or you say the right thing to the wrong audience, bad things can happen. So I'm thinking back through my memory bank to when I was 9 years old, much of a brat like I am today still. And my mom was driving my sisters and I and my cousin and my aunt to the store, and she forgot something, ran back in the house, was all flustered, yelled at us kids. And I turned to my aunt and I said, "My mom's uncool." What kind of response did you think that garnered? Yeah, that was a bit of a tongue lashing, shall we say. Never forget that. But I was reminded by that because I said something that to another 9-year-old brat would probably garner some level of support or empathy. But when I said it to my aunt, who's my mom's sister, it got a very different response. The second element of speeches that are successful speeches is the ability to tell stories. And the reason that stories are so great is because we happen to be able to internalize stories, we can humanize stories, and most importantly, we can remember stories. So when we hear a story about something that comes to mind from my personal experience, when I was all of 2 years old, I was having Thanksgiving at my father's parents' house, my grandparents. And my grandfather apparently was taking what I estimated to be too much cranberry sauce. And I yelled across the table, "Save some!" And I'm reminded of that every Thanksgiving. So it's versus trying to recall how many days John's been a member of Toastmasters. He just darn told you. Can tell me. I challenge anybody to tell me how long John's been a member of Toastmasters. So you've got the difference between facts and figures versus stories. And stories tend to carry with us, at least the impactful ones, almost for a lifetime, or can be a lifetime. The third element of successful speeches is context. So you have to understand your audience, you have to tell stories, but then you have to connect with the audience via context. So let me give you another example. I was interviewing for a position with company YouTube Edit, and when I was interviewing, that right there, in case you missed it, that was some fancy technology there, editing the sound. In case I, never burn bridges, right? So I'm interviewing with this company, and I didn't get a job. I mean, go figure. I couldn't imagine. I thought I hit it out of the park. It was an excellent interview. I prepared for it. I drove sick to it. I had to get a rental car because my car broke down. And I made it back to class that night. No phone call. Alas, no phone call. Reached out for feedback because, like anybody who's interested in improving themselves, we want to understand, why didn't we get the job? We get the feedback. Well, when it didn't come, I got pretty upset. And like any other 20-year-old who's been rejected for a job that they really wanted, I reached out and lashed out using the national media. Some of you might be familiar with a station that used to be popular called Z-Rock. They played classic rock, heavy metal. I knew you would remember them. Well, and I called in during the lunch hour request. I didn't actually call in. We had to fax in our requests. And I put myself in the context of the program director who's getting faxes from all these different places across the country. It's a national syndicated radio station. And I'm thinking to myself, if I was that person, what would make a fax stand out? Because faxes at the time, computers were kind of new. I was speeding on my 486, before Pentiums were even available. And I was in quite the hot rod on my 28K modem, really rocking the internet. And I faxed this fax that said, "Z-Rock rocks, and would you please play this request to company YouTube Edit?" Well, I got another thing coming. And then they actually read it on the air. I don't know what this means, but this is a request from Rick Noel to YouTube Edit, and you've got another thing coming. And the announcer went on to play one of my favorite songs by Judas Priest, "You Got Another Thing Coming." And I would never have gotten to stick my tongue out at this company on the national airwaves, which I did record and will hopefully someday find in my house. The kids will believe this story. But The key to that is putting myself in that person's context. That context, I'm very busy, I'm getting faxes, how do I stand out? How do I get my message out without hopefully burning bridges in the future? So finally, in summary, the key points to take away from this are whether it's a speech, whether it's a marketing message, whatever you're trying to communicate, make sure that you have a really firm understanding of your audience. Don't talk about something your audience is not interested in. The second key aspect is to make sure that you're telling it in the context of a story. People can really get their arms around the story. Rob's story, which is a great story. I bet you a lot of you will remember that a lot longer than how long Rob's been a Toastmaster, for instance, which is also impressive. And then finally, the context. The context is what connects the audience with the story, and it's really the glue that holds everything together. If you can have those three pieces come together, you can give a really winning speech, a great marketing pitch. You can convince national radio to let you stick your tongue out at that employer that should have hired you but didn't. Mr. Toastmaster?